I froze in the doorway of the restroom, unable to believe my eyes. My son, Jerome, was kneeling on the tile floor in front of a toilet, a rag in his hands. Towering over him was Sterling Thorne, his father-in-law, and the owner of this whole damn company. Welcome to Betty's Stories. I share new life stories here every day, and I'd really appreciate it if you hit subscribe and like my video. Now let's jump back into my story. I'm sure you'll love it if you keep listening till the end. Sterling was laughing loudly, his voice echoing off the tiled walls. "There he is, your smart boy with the high honors degree," Sterling shouted, addressing someone behind him. 30 years. Old, college-educated, and all he's good for is this. "Look, Taylor, your husband, found his true calling." I saw Taylor, Jerome's wife, appear in the doorway. She didn't rush to defend her husband. She smiled. She just stood there smiling, watching her own father humiliate the man she had vowed to be with, for better or for worse. Jerome looked up and saw me. The shame in his eyes made me want to melt through the floor. And then he cried. My grown, strong son cried like a little boy. "Mom," was all he could choke out. I turned and walked away. Not because I didn't care, but because if I had stayed for even one more second, I don't know what I would have done to Sterling Thorne. But I knew one thing for certain. That man would pay for every tear my son cried, for every second of humiliation. He would pay so dearly that he would regret the day he decided to break my Rome. My name is Aisha Johnson, and this is my story of how I dismantled the life of a man who dared to touch the most precious thing I have. And know this, by the end of the story, you'll find out the price I made him pay. A price that turned a rich and powerful businessman into a nobody. But first, let's start from the beginning to understand why I went to such lengths. We have to go back many years. I was 28 then, and I had just given birth to Jerome. It felt like my life was finally coming together. I had a husband, a tiny son, and a small apartment on the outskirts of the city. Nothing fancy, but it was ours. I was happy. Then one morning I woke up and found a note on the kitchen table. Just a few lines written in a shaky hand. "I'm sorry. I can't do this. Don't look for me." That was it. No explanation, no reasons, just a note and an empty apartment. The man I trusted, the father of my child, had simply vanished. He left me alone with a 3-month-old baby. For the first few days, I was in shock. I didn't understand what was happening or how it was even possible. But then it sank in. I had no one else to rely on but myself. And I had a son who needed to be fed, clothed, and raised. I took on 3 jobs simultaneously. In the morning, I worked as a cashier at a grocery store. During the day, I was a cleaner at an office building. In the evenings, I did odd jobs scrubbing stairwells in apartment buildings. Yes, that's right. I scrubbed other people's floors just so my son could have a hot dinner. I slept about 4 hours a night, and couldn't remember the last time I bought myself anything new. All the money went to Jerome. I remember getting him ready for kindergarten. I wanted him to have everything the other kids had. New clothes, a new backpack, nice school supplies. I saved up for 6 months, denying myself even the basics. But when he started school that first day, he looked just as good as the others. That was my small celebration, my personal day of victory. Jerome grew up to be a smart boy. He did well in school, never got bad grades, and always helped me around the house. He saw how exhausted I was, and tried not to create any extra trouble. Sometimes I would catch his gaze. So serious, so mature for his age. And I knew he understood everything. He understood that we didn't have money for the toys his classmates had, that I came home utterly drained, and that we were alone in this world. But he never complained. Instead, he promised me, "Mama, I'll study hard. I'll get into college. I'll find a good job. And you'll never have to be this tired again." And you know what? He kept his promise. Jerome graduated high school with high honors and got a full scholarship to college. 5 years later, he earned his degree with distinction. I cried at his graduation from happiness, from pride, from relief. All those years of struggle, all those sleepless nights and exhausting jobs, it had all paid off. My son had become an
educated man.
He achieved what I couldn't afford for myself. And I believed that now he would have a different life, a life of dignity. Right after graduation, Jerome immediately found a job. Swiftline Logistics wasn't the most prestigious company, but it was a decent starting point for his career. The salary was modest, about $1,900 a month. But Jerome was thrilled. He called me the same evening he signed the contract. "Mom, I got hired. Official job, salaried, full benefits." His voice was bursting with pride. "I start tomorrow." I listened, feeling a warmth spread through me. My son, a college graduate with a job, with a future.
Congratulations, son.
"I'm so happy for you. Mom, I'm going to help you now. I'll send money every month. You can finally rest." "Rome, you don't have to." "Yes, I do," he said firmly. "You worked your whole life for me. Now it's my turn." And he truly helped. He transferred $400 every month even, though I knew it wasn't easy for him. He rented a small apartment close to work to save on commuting costs. Ate simply, but he always sent me money. Thanks to his help, I was able to quit one of my jobs. I kept only the grocery store and the office cleaning, 2 shifts instead of 3. For the first time in 30 years, I had free evenings. I could come home at 8 o'clock instead of 10 o'clock. I could watch television, lie on the couch, just be a person, not a workhorse. Jerome came to see me once a week. We ate dinner together. He talked about work, his colleagues, and how he was learning to master routes and logistics. He spoke of his plans to build a career to advance to manager, then to head of the department. "I don't want to stay in a low-level position forever. Mom," he would say, "I want something more." I stroked his head just like when he was a child. "You'll do it all, Rome. You're smart and capable. Just take your time. Everything happens when it should." 6 months passed. Jerome settled into his job and got a small raise. Life was entering a peaceful routine. I thought the worst was behind us, that things would only get better, that my son could peacefully build his life, career, and future. How wrong I was. One evening, it was in October, Jerome called me. I immediately heard a change in his voice, a certain excitement, a special joy. "Mom, are you sitting down?" "I am." "What happened?" "I met a girl." My heart skipped a beat. Of course, I had always dreamed of Jerome having a family, but for some reason at that exact moment I felt an unexplained, deep anxiety. "Really? Tell me about her." I tried to sound joyful. "Her name is Taylor. We met at a business meeting. She came to our office for work. Mom, she's incredible, beautiful, smart, educated. I didn't expect a girl like her to even look at me." That sentence immediately put me on guard. Didn't expect her to look at me. Why? My son was a wonderful person, smart, kind, decent. Any woman should have been happy to be with him. "Jerome, you're a great man." If she saw that, then she's a smart girl. "I want you to meet her," he continued. "Let's all get together this Saturday at a coffee shop." "Of course, son. I'd be happy to meet her." When I hung up, I sat in silence for a long time. For some reason, I didn't feel the happiness a mother should feel upon hearing about her son's girlfriend. It was something else, a premonition, a bad premonition. But I dismissed the thoughts. I was probably just afraid that Jerome would leave my life, start his own family, and I'd be left alone. Just normal maternal possessiveness. Nothing more. Saturday came quickly, and with it the meeting that changed everything. I arrived a little early, nervous, like before an exam. I fixed my hair and looked at my reflection in the mirror. My only decent blouse was washed and ironed. I wanted to look respectable so my future daughter-in-law wouldn't think. Jerome came from a disadvantaged family. They walked in together. Jerome was beaming with happiness, holding her hand. And Taylor? Taylor was beautiful, very beautiful. Long dark hair, perfect. Makeup, an expensive dress, an elegant designer handbag. She looked like a model from a magazine. I instantly felt the difference between us. Jerome introduced us. Mom, this is Taylor. Taylor, this is my mom, Aisha Johnson. Taylor extended her hand, and I noticed her perfectly manicured, well-art for nails. My hands, hardened from work with short, broken nails, looked like an old woman's next to hers. I felt awkward, but I smiled and shook her hand. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Johnson, Taylor said. Her voice was polite, but cold. The smile didn't reach her eyes. She assessed me from head to toe, and I saw something in that look that I disliked immediately, a slight, barely noticeable contempt, but I caught it. We sat down at a table. Jerome ordered coffee and desserts, telling the story of how they met at a business meeting and how instantly he felt an attraction to her. Taylor was mostly silent, occasionally nodding, but rarely joining the conversation. I tried to start a discussion asking about her work and hobbies. I work in marketing, she answered curtly. At my father's company. We do industrial manufacturing. How interesting, I said. And what exactly does your father's company do? Taylor shrugged as if my question was too primitive to warrant a detailed answer. Thorne Manufacturing Group. We produce components for the construction industry. We're one of the largest companies in the region. She spoke about it with such pride, such superiority that it made me uncomfortable. I saw how she looked at our modest coffee shop, my simple clothes, and Jerome, who was trying so hard to impress her. And I understood this girl was used to luxury. She had grown up with wealth and comfort, and Jerome and I were people from a different world for her. After the meeting, Jerome walked me to the bus stop. He asked if I liked Taylor. I wanted to be honest. I wanted to tell him that I felt something was wrong, but he was looking at me with such hope, such happiness in his eyes that I couldn't. I just hugged him and said, "The important thing is that she loves you, son. Nothing else matters." But the doubts remained in my heart, and they only grew stronger with every subsequent meeting. 3 months later, Jerome proposed to Taylor. She accepted, and preparations for the wedding began. Jerome was over the moon telling me over the phone about their plans for their future life while I listened quietly, trying to be happy for him. But anxiety was growing inside me. They decided to hold the wedding at Taylor's parents' house. Jerome tried to suggest a more modest option, a restaurant, a small banquet hall, but Taylor insisted, "We'll celebrate at my parents' place. They have a country estate. We'll organize everything there." Jerome agreed. He always agreed with her. The wedding day arrived. I wore my best dress, which I bought especially for the occasion. I spent 2 months' wages on it, but I wanted to look respectable so Jerome wouldn't be ashamed of his mother. The Thorne house turned out to be a veritable mansion, huge grounds, a high fence, security at the gates. I stepped inside and stopped dead. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, grand staircases, paintings on the walls. People who lived here never had to count every penny, never had to work 3 jobs just to feed their family. The guests gathered in the main hall. Everyone was dressed up. Everyone was self-assured. I felt like an outsider. I stood by the wall, not knowing who to talk to, afraid to say the wrong thing. Then a man approached me, tall, broad-shouldered, in an expensive suit. He looked down at me. His gaze held the same contempt I had seen in Taylor's. "You must be the groom's mother," he said, not asking, but stating as if I were beneath him in rank. "Yes," I replied. "Aisha Johnson." He didn't offer his hand in greeting, just nodded. Sling Thorne, the bride's father. I hope your son understands the honor being bestowed upon him by being accepted into our family. I felt something clench inside me. What honor? My son was educated, decent, and hardworking. He was in no way inferior to them, but I remained silent.
Today
Was Jerome's wedding day, and I didn't want to ruin his celebration. My son is worthy of your daughter, I said quietly. Sterling scoffed. We'll see. Taylor is used to a certain lifestyle. I hope your Jerome can provide it. Although, judging by where he works, he trailed off meaningfully. This man was humiliating my son without even knowing him. He judged him by his salary, his position, his lack of wealth. I wanted to strike him, but I controlled myself, turned, and walked away to avoid saying too much. The wedding was lavish and expensive. Jerome and Taylor looked happy, but I couldn't shake the heavy feeling all evening. I saw Sterling Thorne talking with his guests, laughing, drinking expensive wine, discussing their business.
I saw how
They looked at Jerome like a stranger who had accidentally stumbled into their circle. And then I overheard a conversation. Sterling was standing with a man on the terrace smoking. I walked by and unintentionally caught their words. Well, Sterling, married off your daughter? The man asked. Married off? Sterling replied. Taylor fell in love. What can you do? Truthfully, the groom isn't exactly high caliber.
works at
Some small outfit for peanuts. But no matter, we'll teach him. Maybe he'll amount to something if
handled
correctly. They laughed, and I understood. For Sterling Thorne, my son, was a project, a person to be trained, corrected, and made useful. For the first time in many years, I felt true fear. Fear for Jerome. The wedding was over. The honeymoon ended, and ordinary married life began. Jerome continued to work at Swiftline, and Taylor worked at her father's company. The newlyweds rented a two-bedroom apartment in a good neighborhood. Jerome told me they paid about $1,200 a month for it, which was a huge strain on their budget. In the first few months, I barely saw my son. He was busy with work, setting up their home, and his wife. He called rarely, kept it brief. Mom, everything's fine. Don't worry. But I worried anyway. A mother's heart felt that something was
wrong.
One day, I couldn't take it anymore and drove over to visit them.
I
Bought a cake and some fruit. I wanted to cheer the young couple up. I rang the doorbell. Jerome opened the door, and I
gasped.
In 2 months he had changed. He was thinner, had dark circles under his eyes, and a kind of weariness in his gaze. Rome, are you sick? I pressed my palm to his forehead. No, Mom, just a lot of work. He offered a weak smile.
Comín.
Taylor will be glad to see you. But Taylor didn't look glad. She was sitting on the couch with her phone in her hand and didn't even get up to greet me. Hello, Mrs. Johnson, she said, without looking up from the screen. Hello, Taylor. I brought a cake. I thought we could have tea together. Thank you, but I'm on a diet. Jerome put it in the fridge. Jerome, silently, took the cake and carried it to the kitchen. I sat in an armchair and looked around the apartment. Everything was expensive, stylish, but somehow cold. As if people didn't live here. They just
stayed.
How are you settling in? I asked, trying to make conversation. The apartment is
nice.
The neighborhood is convenient. It's okay. Taylor finally put down her
phone.
Though, of course, I wish it were bigger. But we can't afford more on Jerome's salary. There was something unpleasant in her voice, an accusation, dissatisfaction. Jerome earns well for his age. I defended my son. He has a whole future ahead of him. He's 30 years old, Mrs. Johnson. That's not a whole future ahead. My college friends are already department heads. Some have started their own businesses, and he's still hauling some kind of cargo. Jerome walked out of the kitchen. I saw his cheek twitch. He had heard the words. Taylor, we agreed to discuss this privately, he said quietly. Not in front of my mother. What's the big deal? I'm telling the truth. She shrugged. Dad offered you a job at his company, but you're showing off your pride. I want to earn my place myself. Jerome sat down next to me. His hands were shaking. I don't want to be dependent on anyone. Dependent? Taylor jumped up from the couch. It's called using opportunities. Everyone does it. But no, you're too proud. We'll spend our whole lives living in a rented apartment, scrimping on everything just because you have principles. I watched the scene, feeling everything clench inside. There it was. That was why Jerome looked so drained. This woman was pressuring him day after day, week after week, accusing him of not earning enough, not being successful enough, not being good enough for her. Taylor, I tried to intervene. Jerome works honestly. He's building his career on
His own.
that deserves respect. She looked at me as if I were a bug. Mrs. Johnson, with all due respect, you worked for pennies your whole life. You don't understand how big business works. Connections are everything. And if you have a chance to enter a big company through family, you should use it. Taylor. Jerome raised his voice.
Don't talk to my mother like that.
I'm saying what I think. She crossed her arms. If you want us to have a normal life, future children, a decent car, our own house, you'll have to swallow your pride and accept Dad's offer. I stood up.
I
Need to go. Mom, wait. Jerome tried to hold me back.
No, son.
You two have things to work out. I don't want to interfere. I left. And on the way home, I cried on the bus. This marriage was a mistake. I saw it clearly now. Taylor didn't love
Jerome.
She loved the idea of a successful husband, money, status, and my son was just a tool for her to achieve that. After that visit, Jerome started calling me more often, usually late at night when Taylor wasn't home. He complained that he couldn't handle the constant pressure. Mom, I don't know what to do. It's the same thing every
Day.
She calls me a failure, says all her friends married successful men, and she got stuck with a broke logistics
Guy.
I work, but it's not enough. Rome, do you love her? I asked him directly. He was silent for a long time. I don't know, Mom. I love the girl I met 6 months ago. But now I don't even recognize her.
She's changed.
Or maybe I just didn't see the real Taylor before. Then maybe you should think about no, he interrupted. I made a vow. We're husband and wife. I have to try to save our marriage. Maybe if I really agree to work for my father-in-law, things will
Get better.
Maybe she's right, and I'm just too stubborn. Jerome, don't do it. For her. Only do what you believe is right. I don't even know what's right anymore. His voice trembled. I'm 30 years old, Mom. I should be providing for my family. And if I have to swallow my pride to do that, maybe that's what I have to do.
We said goodbye.
I went to bed, but couldn't sleep. All night I tossed and turned, thinking about what was happening to my son. Taylor was breaking him. Slowly but surely, she was turning him into a man who doubted himself, his abilities, his worth. And I knew if he went to work for Sterling Thorne, it would only get worse. That man wouldn't give Jerome a normal job. He was planning something bad, but there was nothing I could do. I could only wait and hope my son would make the right decision. 2 weeks later, Jerome called again. Mom, I've decided I'll talk to Mr. Thorne.
I'll
Ask him to take me into the company. If it's the only way to keep the peace, I agree. A chill ran through me. Think about it one more time. I already have. I'm going to his office tomorrow. Taylor is happy. She says, I'm finally growing up. I heard such weariness, such submission in his voice that I wanted to scream, but I stayed silent. My son was a grown man. It was his
choice.
I had to respect it, even if I was terrified for him. Jerome set up a meeting with Sterling Thorne for the next day. He prepared for it like an exam, reviewing information about the company, planning what to say and how to
Present himself.
Taylor was ecstatic, even cooked him dinner that evening, something she hadn't done in months. See how simple it is, she said, serving him pasta. One conversation with Dad, and our lives will change. You'll join a major corporation. Start your career. We can get a bigger apartment. Jerome nodded, but I knew he had doubts in his heart. He called me late that night.
Mom, I'm scared. Of.
What, son? That I won't be able to handle it. That I'll disappoint him. That Mr. Thorne will look at me and say, "You're not good enough." I've never worked for a company this big. I don't have experience in manufacturing. Rome, you're smart, educated. You have a degree with distinction. You learn fast. You'll handle it. I hope so. He sighed. This is my last chance, Mom. If this doesn't work out with Taylor, I don't know what will happen. The meeting took place at the Thorne Manufacturing Group office. Jerome arrived in his best suit with a folder of documents, his resume, diploma, and recommendations. The secretary led him into Sterling's massive office. Sterling sat behind an enormous darkwood desk in a leather chair like a king on a throne. He looked up at Jerome and smirked. "Well, son-in-law, are you finally ripe?" he asked instead of a greeting. "Hello, Mr. Thorne." Jerome offered his hand. Sterling shook it weakly, almost reluctantly. "Sit down." Taylor said, "You want to work at our company?" "Yes, I'm ready to apply my knowledge and skills. I'm ready to learn and grow." Stop. Stop. Sterling waved his hand.
No.
Rehearse speeches. I'll hire you, not because you're so talented, but because you're my daughter's husband and I don't want to listen to her whining about how poor her husband is. Jerome clenched his fists under the table, but stayed silent. "What position do you have available?" he asked. "Assistant Logistics Manager," Sterling replied. "Sorry, $3,800 official, plus bonuses if you perform. Start on Monday." $3,800. That was $1,900 more than at Swift Line. Jerome was relieved. Maybe it wasn't so bad after all. Maybe Sterling was actually giving him a chance. "Thank you, Mr. Thorne. I won't let you down. We'll
see."
Sterling leaned back in his chair. "I have high standards. I don't tolerate mistakes or laziness. You will work the way I tell you to. Understood? Understood? Then you're dismissed. Be here by 9 o'clock on Monday. Bring your documents." Jerome left the office. Feeling elated, he immediately called Taylor. It worked. He hired me. $3,800 official dollars. Taylor screamed with joy. "I told you I knew Dad would help."
You.
Rome, this is the start of a new life. He came to see me that evening. I hadn't seen him this happy in a long time. His eyes were bright, and he was smiling. "Mom, everything's going to be okay. I can feel it. Mr. Thorne gave me an opportunity, and I'm going to prove I deserve it. I'll work so hard that he'll regret not hiring me sooner." I looked at him and tried to be happy, but something inside warned me. It's a trap. Sterling, Thorne isn't the kind of person who just helps. He's planning something bad. "Rome, what exactly will you be doing? What are the responsibilities?" "Assistant Logistics Manager. I'll be helping with supply organization, paperwork, quality control. Basically, what I did before, but in a bigger company." And he didn't say anything strange.
No, Mom.
Everything was normal. Just a regular interview. He's just a bit harsh, direct, but that's normal for a businessman at his level. I didn't argue. Maybe I was just being overly suspicious. Maybe Sterling decided to give his son-in-law a chance for his daughter's sake. Maybe everything would
be fine.
The weekend flew by. Jerome prepared for his first day of work, rereading company information, studying the structure, and memorizing the names of key employees. Taylor was affectionate with him, like in the first days of their relationship. Everything seemed fine. On Sunday evening, Jerome called me one last time before starting work. "Mom, big day. Tomorrow. I'm nervous, but in a good way. You know, like before a race. I'm proud of you, son. You're doing great. You'll handle everything. Thanks, Mom. I love you. And I love you, Rome."
We said goodbye.
And I sat in my empty apartment and prayed. I prayed that everything would be okay, that my son wouldn't suffer, that my premonitions were wrong. But on Monday morning, everything came crashing down. At 10 o'clock in the morning,
Jerome called me. He was weeping.
my 30-year-old son was crying into the phone so hard he couldn't speak. What happened? Where are you? Mom, please come. I'm at the office. I'm so ashamed. I'm on my way. Hold on. I dropped everything and raced over.
On
The way to the Thorn Manufacturing Group office, my heart hammered like crazy. What happened? What did that scumbag Sterling do to my son? I ran into the building and went up to the right floor. The secretary tried to stop me, but I pushed past her. I was looking for Jerome calling his name, and then I heard laughter. Sterling Thorne's loud, sickening laughter. I followed the sound, pushed open the door marked restroom, and froze. What I saw will stay with me forever. My son, my smart, educated, worthy son, was kneeling in front of a toilet, a rag in his hands. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, and there were streaks of dirt on his face. His new suit, which he had so proudly worn this morning, was splattered with soapy water. Next to him, Sterling Thorne stood, arms crossed, laughing loudly, disgustingly, with pleasure. Come on, hustle, Sterling yelled. Right here. You missed a spot. See that stain? Or do you have eye trouble? Behind Sterling stood two men in expensive suits, clearly his business partners. They were also chuckling, exchanging glances, watching the spectacle. Sterling, did you seriously hire him for this job? Asked one of them, a gray-haired man in his 60s. Why not? Sterling turned to him.
I
Always say you have to start from the bottom. Let him get to know the company from the inside. Literally, the inside. Restrooms are the foundation of any business. They burst into laughter, and Jerome kept scrubbing the toilet. I could see his shoulders shaking. He was crying. My adult strong son was crying, kneeling in a dirty restroom in front of these men. Mr. Thorne, you promised. I thought I would be an assistant manager. Jerome's voice was barely a whisper. You are an assistant. Sterling leaned toward him. An assistant cleaner. Or did you think I'd just give you a good position? Who are you? Nobody. A logistics guy. From a third-rate firm. You have no connections. No money, nothing. The only thing you have is my daughter, who foolishly married you. Dad's right, Rome. I heard that voice and felt everything drop inside me. Taylor appeared in the doorway. She was standing leaning against the doorframe and smiling. Just standing there and smiling, watching her husband be humiliated. Taylor. Jerome looked up at her, his eyes full of tears and hope. Please tell them this is wrong. Wrong? She stepped closer. And what's right? Living on a pauper salary your whole life. Dad is teaching you. If you want to work for a serious company, you have to start at the very bottom. You need to understand how every little thing works, even the toilets. But he promised me a manager position. $3,800 a month. Sterling laughed even louder. I promised. Boy, where is your contract? Did you sign any paperwork?
No. So stop.
Talking nonsense. I offered you a job at my company, and what that job is, that's for me to decide. And right now, all I see is that you're only fit for this. He kicked the bucket, and water splashed onto the floor, soaking Jerome's pants.
Oops.
Sorry, son-in-law. Looks like you'll have to mop the floor, too. His partners laughed again, and Taylor just shrugged, as if everything happening was completely normal. And then Jerome saw me. Our eyes met. There was so much pain, so much shame, so much desperation in his gaze that I wanted to die right there, and then just to not see it. Mom, he whispered the word, and new tears streamed down his face. I took a step forward. I wanted to rush to him, lift him from the floor, hug him, protect him, but my legs wouldn't obey. I stood rooted to the spot, unable to move, and Sterling.
Turn to me.
Well, well, the mother-in-law has arrived. Aisha Johnson, how timely. Look how hardworking your son is. First day on the job, and he's already putting in the effort. His partners fell silent, sensing the tension. Even they understood that this scene had crossed a line. Sorling, maybe that's enough. The gray-haired man said, "We have a meeting." Yes, of course. Sterling clapped his hands. Jerome, finish up. Here, and I want this place spotless in an hour. You know, we have a 3-month probation period. Fail to perform, and you're out. And Taylor will be without a husband and a provider. They walked out of the restroom. Sterling, his partners. Taylor. They passed me as if I didn't exist. Taylor didn't even look my way. That disgusting smile was still playing on her face. Jerome and I were left alone. He was sitting on the floor, in a puddle of water with a rag in his hands, weeping uncontrollably.
Mum, I'm sorry.
Forgive me. I'm so ashamed. You shouldn't have seen this.
I walked over
To him, knelt down and embraced him, holding him close like I did when he was little and hurting. Rome, get up. Get up right now.
You're
Leaving here this instant.
I can't, Mom.
Taylor, she said if I quit on the first day she'd leave me. I promised her. I gave her my word. Listen to me. I took his face in my hands. These people are breaking you deliberately. They're turning you into a slave. And this is just the beginning. Do you understand? Just the beginning. If you stay, it will only get worse. But I have to. I'm her husband. I have to provide for my family. Not at this price, son. Not at this price. But I saw it in his eyes. He wouldn't leave. He would endure it. For Taylor, for the marriage, to prove that he wasn't weak, not a failure, not a useless husband. I walked out of the Thorne Manufacturing Group building and stood on the street for a long time, breathing in the cold air, trying to calm down. Passers-by walked by. Cars drove past. Life went on as if nothing had happened. But inside me, everything was burning. My son, my only son, for whom I had given my whole life, was kneeling in front of a toilet while his father-in-law and wife laughed at him. And I realized I can't just stand by and watch this. I can't wait for them to finally break him. I have to do something. I pulled out my phone. In my contact list there was one name, a man, who had helped me once long ago when my husband abandoned me with an infant, a man I trusted. I dialed the number. The phone rang 3 times before someone picked up. Darius Vaughn speaking. The voice had the same confidence and calm as it did 30 years ago. Mr. Vaughn, this is Aisha Johnson. Do you remember me? A second of silence. Aisha Johnson. Of course I remember. It's been so many years.
How are you?
How's Jerome?
Bad.
Mr. Vaughn. Very bad. I need your help. Can you meet me at your office today if possible? What time works for you? I can. Be there now. Of course, I'll be waiting. Darius Vaughn was the lawyer to me when my husband left us. I needed help with paperwork, child support, and divorce. I didn't have money to hire an expensive lawyer, but Darius helped almost pro bono. He said he couldn't watch a woman with a baby be left alone without support. 30 years had passed since then. We hadn't seen each other, but I always remembered his kindness. I remembered that there were still decent people in the world. His office was downtown in a small business center. I went up to the 3rd floor, found the right door with the sign, Vaughn Law Firm. I knocked.
Come in. I
walked in. Darius Vaughn stood up from behind his desk. He had aged, of course. Gray hair, wrinkles around his eyes, but he was still well-maintained with an attentive gaze. Aisha. He walked around the desk and shook my hand firmly. Please sit down.
There.
Coffee? No, thank
you.
I need help. He sat down across from me, folding his hands on the table.
I'm listening.
And I told him everything. How Jerome married Taylor, about the wedding at the Thorne house, about Sterling and his arrogance, about how Taylor pressured my son to go work for her father, and about this morning, the toilet, the rag, the laughter, the humiliation. Darius listened silently. His face was emotionless, but I saw his jaw tighten as I recounted the restroom scene. Aisha, does Jerome know you're here? No, he must not know, Mr. Vaughn. I can't. Just watch my son being broken. I need to do something, and I want to hit Sterling Thorne so hard that he'll regret everything. What exactly do you want? I want to destroy him, I said. These words calmly, firmly. He humiliated my son, made him a laughingstock, forced him to kneel. I want him to feel the same thing. Darius leaned back in his chair, thinking. I understand, but revenge is a dangerous thing, Aisha. Are you ready for the consequences? I am. I'm 60 years old. I've worked my whole life, saved, denied myself everything. I have some small savings, an apartment. I'm ready to invest everything I have, just so that scoundrel pays. Darius stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at the street. Sterling Thorne, owner of Thorne Manufacturing Group, a major company well known in the region. This won't be easy. People like him are protected by money, connections, and lawyers. But there has to be a way. There has to be a weakness. He turned back to me. Everyone has a weakness. Give me 1 week. I will gather information about this man and his company. I'll find out everything I can. Finances, partners, debts, scandals, and if I find a loophole, we act. Agreed. Agreed. How much do I owe? You? Nothing yet. Let's see what we find first. If I find something useful, we'll discuss the terms. I stood up and extended my hand. Thank you, Mr. Vaughn. You have no idea how important this is to me. I do. He squeezed my hand tightly. I'm a father myself. I understand what it means to see your child hurt. I left his office with a lighter heart. For the first time all day, I felt hope that something would be done. Justice would prevail. The week dragged on painfully. Jerome called me every evening telling me about his day. And with each passing day, his voice sounded more tired, more lifeless. Mom, today Mr. Dr. Thorne made me clean the windows in the whole building. 32 windows. He said it's part of the training that I need to understand how important cleanliness is in a company. Son, leave that place, please. I can't. Taylor said that if I quit, she'll file for divorce. Mom, I love her. I can't lose her. I listened and kept silent, because I knew he didn't love Taylor. He was just afraid to admit he made a mistake. Afraid that if they divorced, everyone would call him a failure, that he couldn't keep his family together, that he didn't measure up. 8 days later, Darius called. Aisha, come over. I found something. I rushed over within half an hour. Darius was sitting at his desk. A thick folder of documents lay before him. Sit down. He gestured to a chair. What I'm about to tell you will surprise you. Tell me. Sterling Thorne is on the verge of bankruptcy. Darius opened the folder and pulled out several sheets. His company is in critical financial condition. He has $2.25 million in bank debt, overdue loans, unpaid supplier invoices, and production is down 30% in the last year. I stared at him. But how? He lives in a huge house and drives an expensive car. Facade. Darius shrugged. Many businessmen live on credit, showing the world luxury, but they're actually hanging by a thread. Sterling Thorne made several major bad investments 3 years ago. He put money into a project that failed, lost over $1 million. Since then, he's been trying to climb out, but he's sinking deeper. So, the company could go bankrupt. It won't. Just could go bankrupt. It will go bankrupt within a year if he doesn't find an investor or pay off his debts. Banks are already threatening to seize his assets. Partners are breaking contracts. He's holding on only by reputation and old connections. I looked at the documents and felt something twist inside me. Sterling Thorne? The arrogant, brazen, rich Sterling Thorne was actually a bankrupt.
He was.
Humiliating my son when he himself was standing on the edge of a cliff. Mr. V. On what if we buy his company? He looked at me intently.
Are you
Serious? Absolutely. How much would it cost? Darius picked up a calculator and began to figure it out. To buy a controlling interest, we need to buy out the debt from the banks, negotiate with creditors, and offer Thorne favorable terms, roughly $1.7 to $2.25 million. My breath caught. $2.25 million. I had $45,000 in savings. My apartment was worth another $75,000. Total $120,000. Where would I get the
rest?
Aisha? Darius leaned closer. I understand your desire, but it's unrealistic. You don't have that kind of money. What if I take out a loan?
You're
60 years old. A bank won't give a loan that size to a retiree. I lowered my head.
He was right.
It was crazy. I couldn't buy a company worth $2.25 million. It was impossible. But then, Darius continued, however, there is another option. I looked up. What is
it?
We create a shell company, a dummy corporation that on paper looks like a major investor. You invest your $120,000 as the initial deposit. I find investors who are willing to chip in for a stake. We raise the necessary amount by the company through the intermediary and then reveal the cards. Sterling will find out that his company is now owned by Aisha Johnson. I looked at him and knew this was the chance. The only chance. Is this legal? Absolutely. We're just using standard corporate acquisition schemes. Nothing criminal. Then let's do it. Darius extended his hand to me. Agreed. Operation initiated. I shook his hand and felt it. The war had begun and I was going to win it. While Darius initiated the operation to create the shell company, Jerome's life turned into a nightmare. He called me every evening, and I heard less and less hope in his voice. Mom, today, Mr. Thorne made me unload semi-trucks. He told me, 8 hours straight, boxes weighing 110 pounds. My back is killing me. Rome, but you're an assistant logistics manager. That's not your job. He says I have to understand all the processes from the inside, that a real manager knows every stage of production. Taylor thinks so too. Taylor. Every time he said her name, I clenched my fists. That woman wasn't defending her husband. On the contrary, she supported her father in everything. On Jerome's third week of work, I decided to go to their apartment myself. I rang the doorbell. Taylor opened it in a silk robe, a glass of wine in her hand. It was 7 o'clock in the evening. Mrs. Johnson, what are you doing here? She didn't even invite me in, just stood in the doorway. I want to see Jerome. Where is he? At work.
Where
else? Dad gave him a task to inventory the warehouse. He'll be back late.
At
8 o'clock in the evening. At the warehouse. Taylor shrugged. Real men work late, not like those failures who rush home to their wives at 5 o'clock. I stepped closer. Taylor, tell me honestly, don't you feel sorry for him at all? He's your husband. She looked at me with cold eyes and sipped her wine. Sorry, Mrs. Johnson. Rome chose this life. He wanted to work for a big company, so he's working.
Dad
is teaching him. Turning him into a real man, not a softie. He's turning him into a slave. I burst out. He makes him kneel, humiliates him in front of people. That's not training. That's abuse. Taylor smirked. You just don't understand how business works. In serious companies, everyone goes through this, a test of toughness. The weak break and leave. The strong survive and build a career. And if Jerome breaks, then he's not my man. She said it calmly, as if she were talking about defective goods. I need a strong man, Mrs. Johnson, one who can provide for me and future children, not a winner who runs to cry to his mother after the first difficulty. I looked at her and understood. This woman didn't love my son. Never did. For her, he was a project and investment. If the project failed, she would simply find another one. I'll go, I said softly. Tell Jerome. I stopped by. I will if I remember. She closed the door, and I stood in the hallway and cried. My son was living in this hell, working, late, enduring humiliation, and at home he was met by a wife who thought he was weak. The next day I met Darius at his office. He spread the documents before me. Aisha, I've created the shell company. Invest Active. Officially, it's registered under a nominee, a friend of mine who agreed to help for a small fee. On paper, the company looks solid. Office, accounts, transaction history. What about the money? Where are we getting the 2.25 million? Darius pushed a calculator with the figures toward me. You have 45,000 in cash and an apartment worth 75,000. That's 120,000. I found 3 investors who are willing to fund the project each for 450,000. That's 1.35 million.
Total.
We have 1.47 million. We're short about 780,000.
Correct.
But we can take out a loan for Invest Active secured by the future assets, namely Thorn Manufacturing Group itself.
The bank
Will grant the loan if they see we are buying a real business. And if the bank refuses, they won't. I have connections. I've already arranged it with a manager at one of the banks. He's ready to process the deal. I looked at the numbers and realized it was real. Crazy risky, but real. Mr. Vaughn, if we do this, I will lose everything. My apartment, my savings, everything I've accumulated over 30 years.
Yes.
And if the plan fails, you'll be out on the
Street.
But if it works, you will own a company worth over 4 million and you can destroy Sterling Thorn. I closed my eyes. I pictured Jerome's face when he was kneeling in that restroom. I pictured Sterling laughing at him, Taylor smiling. Let's do it. I opened my eyes and looked at Darius. I'm ready to risk everything. Then sign the documents. We start now. The next 2 weeks were insane. I sold my apartment, rented a small shared room apartment on the city's outskirts for about $400 a month, took out all my savings and signed the papers transferring the money to Invest Active. Darius met with the investors, convinced them, showed them the calculations, explaining that Thor Manufacturing Group had huge potential and was just in a crisis, and that after a proper restructuring, it would be profitable. The investors agreed.
The
Bank approved the $780,000 loan secured by future assets with an 18% annual interest rate. Usurious terms, but there were no other options. While I was busy with this, Jerome continued to work for Sterling. He called less and less often. His voice was getting quieter. One day, he said, "Mom, I'm tired. I'm just really tired. Rome, quit that job, please." I can't, Taylor said. She said that if I leave, I'm a complete failure. That no other woman would look at me. That I'm lucky she married me at all. She's not telling the truth. You are a
wonderful man. No, Mom.
I haven't achieved anything. I'm 30 years old, and
I'm cleaning toilets.
Maybe she's right. Maybe I really am worthless. I listened to those words and felt something tear inside. They were breaking him psychologically, morally, turning him into a man who hated himself. A month after the operation began, Darius called me. "Aisha, we have all the money, 2.25 million collected. Now we need to approach Sterling Thorn with the offer."
How do we do that?
Officially through lawyers. Invest Active will send him an offer to purchase a controlling stake and buy out the debts on terms he can't refuse.
What?
If he refuses? He won't. His company is hanging by a thread. The banks are about to seize his assets. We're offering him a way out. He'll take the money, pay off his debts, and keep something. Otherwise, he loses everything. When do we send the offer? Tomorrow. I sighed. So, the finale starts tomorrow. The offer from Invest Active was delivered to Sterling Thorne. The next day, Darius told me that the lawyers personally brought the documents, placed them on the director's desk, and said, "You have 3 days to make a decision." Sterling, as Darius expected, took the documents, started reviewing them, and consulting with his lawyers. He thought, calculated, and analyzed for 3 days.
And
During that time, something happened that I didn't expect. Jerome called me. It was 9 o'clock in the evening. Mom, his voice trembled. "Can I come over?" "Of course, son." "What happened?"
I quit. My heart jumped.
"You quit.
Jerome, how?
What happened?" "Just come over and tell."
Me.
"Can I just stay with you tonight?" "I have nowhere else to go." "Come immediately." An hour later, there was a knock on the door. I opened it and gasped. Jerome was standing on the doorstep with a backpack. His face was puffy, his eyes red, and he had a bruise on his cheek. "Rome, my God. What happened to you?" He walked in, sank onto the couch, and buried his face in his hands. "Mom, I couldn't take it anymore. I just couldn't take it." I sat next to him and hugged him. "Tell me what happened." He took a deep breath and began to speak. "Today, Mr. Thorne had important clients visit from New York, major investors who were considering investing in the company. Sterling wanted to impress them, show them what a successful enterprise he had." Jerome paused, swallowing hard.
They took a
Tour of the building. Sterling showed them the workshops, the warehouses, the offices, and then they went into the restroom, and the toilet was backed up. One of them wasn't working. I already
knew where this was going.
Sterling called for me in front of those men. Jerome said, "We have a problem. Fix it immediately." I told him we needed to call a plumber. And he laughed and said, "You are our plumber. Grab the plunger and get to it." Jerome clenched his fists. "Mom, there were 7 men in expensive suits standing there. They were watching me." And Sterling held out the plunger and said, "Well, son-in-law, show us what you've got. Or can you only talk, and you?" I refused. For the first time in 2 months, I said no.
I
Told him it wasn't my job, that I wasn't a plumber, that I had a college degree with high honors. A weak smile appeared on Jerome's face. You know what he said? He said, "Your degree is worth as much as that toilet paper. You're nothing. An empty suit. And if it weren't for my daughter, you'd be dying at your pauper's job for $1,900 a month." Oh my God. And then he turned to those investors and said, "See, that's why I don't hire relatives for serious positions.
They
Think they're entitled to everything, but in reality, they're useless dead weight." Jerome stood up, pacing the room. They all laughed. All those New York businessmen stood there and laughed, looking at me, and I just turned around and left. I went to the office, wrote my resignation letter, put it on the secretary's desk, and walked out of the building. "You did the right thing, Rome. You did the right thing." "No,
Mom.
I did the wrong thing." He stopped and looked at
Me.
When I got home and told Taylor I quit, she screamed.
She called me a
Coward. Said I disgraced her in front of her father. That she couldn't be the wife of a failure who couldn't even last a month at a real company. Taylor, she said it was over. That she was filing for divorce. That I wasn't a man, but a weakling. That her friends were right when they said she made a mistake marrying me. Jerome's voice cracked, and then she grabbed my backpack, started throwing my things into it and screaming, "Get out. Get out of here.
I
Don't want to see you." I tried to stop her, and she hit me. He pointed to the bruise on his cheek. I grabbed the backpack and left. I had nothing else to take. Everything else is hers. The apartment is paid for with her money. The furniture is hers. Even the clothes I'm wearing she bought.
Jerome sank
Onto the couch and started crying. Not quietly, not restrained. He sobbed uncontrollably, like a child betrayed by the people closest to him. I hugged him, held him tight, and stroked his head. Rome, my dearest, everything will be okay. I promise you, everything will be
Okay.
how, Mom? He looked at me through his tears. How can it be okay? I lost my
Job.
I lost my wife. I lost my home. I have nothing. I'm 30 years old, and I'm living with my mother again. I'm a failure. A complete no. I took his face in my hands. You are not a failure. You are a strong man. You endured 2 months in hell. You took the humiliation, but you didn't break. And today you found the strength to say no. That's not
Weakness, Rome.
That's strength. But Taylor didn't love you. Never did. She loved the idea of a successful husband. And when you didn't meet her expectations, she threw you out like a useless item. People like that don't deserve your tears. Jerome wiped his face with his sleeve. I'm so tired, Mom. I just want to sleep.
Go.
Go lie down in my room. I'll make up the bed. I tucked him in, covering him with a blanket just like when he was a child. He closed his eyes and fell asleep almost immediately. He hadn't slept properly in 2 months.
I
Went into the kitchen, sat at the table, and called Darius. Jerome quit. Taylor threw him out.
He's
With me. I understand, Darius said. Aisha, I have news. Sterling Thorne agreed to the deal. The negotiations are scheduled for tomorrow, the final meeting where he will sign the documents. I want to be there.
What? I want to be at that meeting.
I want to see his face when he finds out the truth. Darius was silent. It's risky.
He
Might cause a scene. Let him cause a scene. I'm not afraid. I want him to see
me.
I want him to know who destroyed him. All right. The meeting is tomorrow. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon at the notary's office. Be there. I hung up the phone. Tomorrow. Tomorrow. Sterling Thorne would find out that his life was over, and I would be there. I would look him in the eye for my son. The next day at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I was standing at the entrance to the notary's office. Darius met me at the door. Aisha, are you sure? It's not too late to stay away. I can handle the meeting without you.
No.
I shook my head. I have to be there. I have to see his face. Very well, then let's go. Sterling is already inside with his lawyers. We entered the spacious office. A notary, a woman in her 50s, in a strict suit, sat at a large table.
To
Her right sat Sterling Thorne with 2 men in suits, his attorneys. Sterling looked tired, aged. The last few months of crisis had clearly taken a toll on him. When I walked in, he looked up and frowned. Who is this? He asked Darius. I arranged a meeting with representatives of Invest Active. Please have a seat, Mr. Thorne. Darius gestured to a chair. I'll explain everything in a moment. Sterling grumbled with annoyance, but sat down. His lawyers exchanged glances. The notary spread the documents on the table. Gentlemen, we have gathered here to finalize the purchase agreement for the controlling stake in Thorne Manufacturing Group. She began. The seller is Mr. Sterling D. Thorne. The buyer is the company Invest Active. All documents have been reviewed, and the terms have been agreed upon. All that remains is to sign the contract. Sterling picked up his pen. Let's make this quick. I have other meetings today. 1 minute. Darius raised a hand. Mr.
Thorne.
Under the terms of the agreement, the buyer has the right to disclose their identity at the moment of signing.
I wish to exercise that right.
Sterling stopped writing. What identity?
You
Represent. Invest Active. Invest Active is a legal entity, but behind it stands a real person. The person who invested the money, brought the investors together, and organized the entire operation. Sterling put his pen down. And who is this mysterious benefactor? Darius turned to me. Aisha Johnson. Silence. Sterling stared at me without blinking. His face slowly changed color from normal to crimson.
What?
He finally
Sputtered.
What did you say? The new owner of the controlling stake in your company is Aisha Johnson. Darius repeated calmly. The mother of your former employee, Jerome Johnson. Sterling leaped from his chair. This is some kind of joke. This cleaner can't buy my company. She doesn't have that kind of money. The money is there. Darius opened his folder and pulled out bank statements. $2.25 million. Everything is legal. Everything is verified. Bank guarantees. Transfer confirmations. Your lawyers can check. One of Sterling's lawyers took the documents and began to examine them. After a minute, he nodded. Mr. Thorne, everything is in order. The money is real. The deal is clean.
No.
Sterling slammed his fist on the table. I won't sign. I won't let this woman buy my company. Mr. Thorne, the notary, intervened. You have already given your consent. If you refuse now, you will have to pay a penalty of $225,000. Plus, the banks will seize your assets next week. You have no other choice. Sterling grabbed his hair. This is
Impossible.
where did she get that kind of money? I stood up, walked closer to the table, and looked him straight in the eye. I worked my whole life, Mr. Thorne. I saved every
Penny.
I sold my apartment. I invested everything I had. I found investors.
I
Took out a loan. All so I could take away the one thing you were so proud of.
Why?
He yelled. Now, what did I do to you? You humiliated my son. You made him kneel. You forced him to clean toilets, haul boxes, and endure abuse in front of people, in front of your daughter.
You
Broke him for 2 months, turning him into a slave. He agreed to work for me. Sterling paced the office. Because your daughter pressured him. She called him a failure if he wouldn't work at your company. Sue me, Darius said
calmly.
but I assure you, you will lose. Everything is perfectly legal.
We
Violated no laws. You were simply offered a chance to sell your company, and you agreed. One of Sterling's lawyers leaned in and whispered something in his ear. Sterling listened, and his face grew paler. Mr. Thorne, the lawyer spoke quietly. But I heard him. We checked everything. The deal is clean. If you refuse, the banks will take everything tomorrow. You will be left with nothing. At least this way you get money to pay off the debts. Sterling slumped into the chair. His hands were shaking so hard he could barely hold the pen. But he signed the documents one after another. The notary checked, applied the seals. The deal is complete. From this moment on, Aisha Johnson is the owner of the controlling stake in Thorne Manufacturing Group. I looked at Sterling. This arrogant, haughty man who had laughed at my son was now sitting before me, broken and empty. Mr. Thorne, I said softly, you are fired from all positions immediately. He looked up at me. What? You are no longer the CEO, the owner, or anything. You can collect your personal belongings from your office by the end of the day. Security will escort you
out.
You can't do
This.
I can. I am the owner now, and my first decision is to get rid of you. Darius handed me another document. Aisha, here is the termination order. Sign here. I signed. Sterling looked at me with hatred, but he could do nothing. You know, Mr. Thorne, I leaned closer to him. If you want, I can offer you a job in the company. There's one vacancy. Which one? He ground it out. The toilet cleaner. Salary? $1,000 a month. How does that offer sound? His face twisted with rage. He jumped up, grabbed a folder from the table, and hurled it against the wall. You will all burn in hell, he screamed, and stormed out of the office. His lawyers hurried after him. The door slammed shut. We were left alone. Darius, the notary, and me. Congratulations, Aisha, Darius said. You are now the owner of a major company. I sank into the chair, my hands shaking. I did it. I really did it. That same evening, I came home. Jerome was sitting in the kitchen drinking tea. He looked better, rested and clean. Mom, where were you? He
asked.
I was worried. I sat across from him and took his hands in mine. Rome, I need to tell you something. And I told him everything.
How I saw him.
In that restroom. How I contacted Darius about the operation to buy the company, about today's meeting, and how Thorn Manufacturing Group now belonged to me. Jerome listened in silence. His face showed no emotion. When I finished, he sat for a long time, staring out the window. Mom, why? He finally asked.
Quietly.
Why did you do that?
For you.
So that man would pay for what he
did to you.
You sold your apartment, invested all your money, took out a loan. Mom, you risked everything.
I
couldn't watch you being broken. You are my son, the only person I have lived for. All these years. Jerome stood up and walked to the window. And now what?
You
have a company that's on the verge of bankruptcy. Debts, problems, loans. How will you handle that? I smiled.
Not me. We?
He turned around.
What?
Rome, I'm appointing you as the CEO of Thorn Manufacturing Group. Starting tomorrow, you're in charge of the company. Mom, are you crazy? I can't do that. I have no experience running a business that big. But you have an education, intelligence, and honesty. You know logistics. You know how to work with documents. And Darius Vaughn will be your advisor. Together, you will handle it. But Rome, I walked up to him. This is your chance. A chance to prove to yourself and everyone else that you are not a failure, that you are capable of
more.
Sterling Thorne tried to break you, but you endured. Now show him that you are stronger. Jerome looked at me for a long time, then slowly nodded. All right, Mom.
I'll try.
The next day, Jerome and I arrived at the Thorn Manufacturing Group office. The employees greeted us with surprised looks. The news of the change in ownership had already spread through the
company.
I gathered everyone in the conference room. About 100 people, managers, accountants, logistics, personnel, and workers. Hello, I began. My name is Aisha Johnson. As of today, I am the owner of this company. I know that many of you have late paychecks. I know the company is in crisis, but I promise we will get out of this. Debts will be paid, salaries will be brought current, and the company will be profitable again. People exchanged glances. Some believed, some doubted.
I
am appointing Jerome Johnson as the new Chief Executive Officer. I pointed to my son. He will manage the company, and I will remain on the board of directors and oversee the strategy. After the meeting, Jerome sat in Sterling's former office, now his office. Darius brought him a stack of documents. Jerome, here is the list of debts. Here is the payment schedule. Here are the contracts with partners that need to be reviewed. Let's get to work. The next few months were frantic. Jerome worked 14 hours a day meeting with creditors, arranging payment plans, looking for new partners, optimizing production, and cutting unnecessary expenses. His first action was to pay all the employees their overdue salaries. People were shocked. After Sterling, they hadn't been paid for months, but the new CEO found the money in a week. Jerome personally visited the partners, apologized for the supply disruptions under the previous management, and offered new terms. Many agreed to give the company a second chance. 3 months later, we reached a positive balance. 6 months after that, we started making a profit, and after 1 year, Thorn Manufacturing Group, which we renamed Johnson Holdings, was fully restored. Employees respected Jerome. He didn't yell at them. He didn't humiliate them. He didn't make them kneel.
He talked to people like
human beings, remembered their names, and asked about their lives because he himself had been through humiliation and knew how much it hurt. A month after Jerome took over the company, Taylor called him.
He told me
about the conversation that evening. She was crying. Mom, she said she was wrong, that she loves me, and that she wants to come back. And what did you say? I said it was too late, that I was filing for divorce, that I don't want to see her in my life anymore. I hugged him. You did. The right thing, son. Taylor really did try to come back. She showed up at the office, waited for Jerome by his apartment building, and sent messages, but he was adamant. He filed the divorce papers, and 2 months later, the marriage was dissolved. The Thorne family fell apart. Sterling, having lost his business and money, moved into a small shared-room apartment on the outskirts. He tried to find work, but no one wanted to hire the former owner of a failed company. He lived on welfare, barely making ends meet. Sterling's wife, Gail, couldn't handle the collapse and moved in with her sister in another state. She filed for divorce. Sterling was left alone. Taylor remarried an older businessman with money, but she wasn't happy. I saw her once at the mall. She looked tired and miserable, even though she was wearing expensive clothes. And Jerome flourished. A year after the divorce, he met a woman named Chloe. She was an architect, simple, sincere, and kind. They dated for 6 months. And then Jerome came to me and said, "Mom, I want to marry her, but only if you approve." I met Chloe and immediately knew this was the girl my son needed. She looked at him with love, genuine love, without calculation or materialism. They had a modest wedding with close friends. Jerome was happy, truly happy. 2 years later, they had a son. My grandson's name is Kai. I held him in my arms for the first time and cried with joy. The circle was complete. I, who was once left alone with an infant, was now holding my grandson, standing next to my successful, happy son. Jerome became a respected businessman. Johnson Holdings thrived. He built an honest company where every employee was valued, where they paid decent salaries, and where human dignity was respected. I retired, but remained on the board of directors. Sometimes I went to the office, watched my son work, and was proud of him. I saw Sterling a couple of times. Once in a grocery store, he was standing at the counter with cheap products counting change. He was aged, hunched over, in a worn jacket. He didn't notice me, and I just walked past him. You know, I didn't feel gloating. I didn't feel satisfaction at his downfall. I just understood life had put everything in its place. A man who built his happiness on the humiliation of others got what he deserved. Now I'm 65 years old. I'm a grandmother. I have a son, a daughter-in-law, and a grandson. I have a small but cozy apartment. I have a peaceful life. Sometimes I remember the day I saw Jerome kneeling in the restroom, and I realized that everything I did afterward was right. Not for revenge, not for money, but so that my son would not lose himself. So that he would remember that he is a person, that he has dignity. This is a story about how a mother's love is capable of anything, about how no one has the right to break another human being, and about how justice can win if you are ready to fight for it. I'm really glad you're here and that I could share my story with you. If you liked it, show me by liking the video and subscribing to my channel. Let's see how many of us there are. Write in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is. I'm so curious to know where all you wonderful people are tuning in from. If you want to support me a little extra, you can also send a small donation. I share new life stories for you every single day. And now 2 of my most popular stories will pop up on the screen, so you can choose what to watch.